The Iranian regime, you laid it out a bit, is more vulnerable right now than it's ever been, at least since the 1980s, the Iran-Iraq war. I mean, there's a clear path to Iran's nuclear sites right now. Hamas and Hezbollah largely smashed. Iran's air defense is taken out a little while ago by the Israeli Air Force. They're very vulnerable right now. It seems like a time for the U.S. and Israel together to push the agenda. For the first time in a long time, the Iranian regime is on the run. Israel has delivered heavy blows to Iran and its proxies over the past few months that have left the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism reeling. So how can Israel and the incoming Trump administration take advantage and turn up the heat even more? Here to break it down is Emily Schrader, host of ILTV's Viewpoint and co-host of The Quad on JNS.org. Emily is also author of the upcoming book, 10 Things Every Jew Should Know Before Going to College. Emily, great title, first of all.
Thank you.
And we're excited for the new book, and great to have you here. Hey, let's start with Iran. You're a foremost expert on the Iranian regime, the threat it poses. I'd imagine the Ayatollahs are quaking in their boots right about now with Donald Trump returning to office alongside Benjamin Netanyahu.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you don't need any further evidence than what we saw just in the past few days with the Iranian regime suddenly deciding that they're going to hold off on their retaliation strike against the state of Israel. So already we see things lining up a bit more like we expected in the event of a Trump victory in this election. And I'm very hopeful for the first time in a long time about what the future may be for regime change in Iran.
Yeah, and the contrast, Emily, I think is so stark between the Trump administration incoming and who he surrounded himself with so far and the Biden-Harris administration. Can you talk from an Israeli perspective how that's been so difficult for Israel, especially since October 7th, Israel trying to make moves against Hamas and Hezbollah and restrained at every turn by the Biden-Harris administration?
Absolutely. I mean, I think for the past, almost 4 years now, we've seen an incredibly complex situation for Israel to be able to deal with Israel's enemies. Forget all the internal issues in Israel. That's a separate issue. Internationally, we're talking about the terror organizations, the proxies of the Islamic Republic of Iran. That is Israel's foremost issue right now, be it in Gaza, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, in Yemen, all of those places, or in Iran itself. All of those places we're dealing with terror proxies of the regime. And unfortunately, what we've seen from the Biden-Harris administration is that they're holding, they're tying Israel's hands every step of the way instead of letting Israel get the job done. By the way, also for the United States, they should be thanking Israel for what Israel has done with Hezbollah, taking off every single Hezbollah leader responsible for the murder of more than 200 American servicemen in 1983 alone in the Marine barracks bombing. I mean, this was a huge success for America.
Yes.
So this is how the U.S. administration should be, and it's not a partisan issue. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. On the international front, those terrorists, they want to kill Americans every bit as much as they want to kill Israelis, and they don't care if you're a Democrat or a Republican or an Arab Israeli or a Jewish Israeli. To them, you're fair game. You are the target for this Islamist radical agenda. And that's what all of us, bipartisan, need to be united against. And unfortunately, we just haven't seen that with this administration that's been extremely weak.
Yeah, hopefully it's a new day. And Emily, you make great points all around. Israel is the first line of defense for all of Western civilization. And by the way, it seems the Iranian regime, you laid it out a bit, is more vulnerable right now than it's ever been, at least since the 1980s, the Iran-Iraq war. I mean, there's a clear path to Iran's nuclear sites right now. Hamas and Hezbollah largely smashed. Iran's air defense is taken out a little while ago by the Israeli Air Force. They're very vulnerable right now. It seems like a time for the U.S. and Israel together to push the agenda.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's no better time than perhaps this coming January to deal with this Islamic regime in Iran. And I want to add one more thing that a lot of people in the U.S. media and the U.S. public maybe don't understand, and that is that the Iranian people are majority against this regime. It is not the same situation as we've seen in Gaza, for example, where you saw polls immediately after October 7th, with Palestinians claiming 80+% supported what Hamas did on October 7th. They voted for Hamas. Don't forget. It was a while ago, of course, not a democratic area we're talking about here, but they did vote for Hamas. They support terrorism. The poll after poll after poll proves this, not biased polls, polls from Arab sources, polls from Pew. They support terrorism, the majority of them, although it has been reduced over time after a year of fighting. Iran is not like this. The majority of the people are against the regime. They want regime change. Before October 7th, we saw the Women Life Freedom protests, which I was very involved with. I actually organized one of the only protests in the Middle East for the people of Iran. Ironic that it's coming from the little Satan, Israel, of course, but that is the Israeli people do stand with the Iranian people. And I think that we also have an opportunity here on the ground in Iran for the people to rise up and actually have a regime change and some kind of revolution inside of Iran. It's not going to be a foreign power, be it Israel or the U.S., that brings about regime change in Iran. It's going to be the people of Iran. And we've actually seen Trump echo that sentiment both before and after the election when it comes to Iran. And Netanyahu, who recently stated that Trump and Netanyahu see eye to eye on the deal with Iran. So clearly, this isn't about forcing a regime change. It's about giving the people of Iran the opportunity to step up and to do something different and to have a different regime in Iran, aided hopefully by strong action, be it sanctions or military, from the United States and from Israel.
Yeah, Emily, about 30 seconds until the break, then we'll bring you right back. The Iranian people, by and large, on average, do not hate Israel. This is a regime problem in Iran.
Not only do they not hate Israel, the Iranian people adore Israel. Yeah. You see the chants in the streets. You see people supporting Israel. You see graffiti supporting Netanyahu and supporting the state of Israel throughout this war. I have never received as many condolences and messages of support as I have after October 7th from Iranians. I have about 70,000 followers inside of Iran who are regularly engaging with me from inside Iran. I also get photos and videos all the time of them walking around Israeli flags that, like, the regime has placed outside of their schools. At football games, they're chanting against the propaganda of the regime, waving Palestinian flags, rolling out busts of Soleimani. You see crowds booing. You see them chanting against that. Nowhere else in the world do you see that, including, unfortunately, the West.
Iran's nuclear program. I mean, obviously they are close. They've been close. And now that their regime is in major trouble, as you laid out before the break, could the mullahs kind of make a sprint towards the finish line here in order to maybe, in their view, preserve their regime and try and break out and acquire the bomb? Is that a concern?
I mean, I think that that's obviously the major concern for the Western world when it comes to dealing with this Islamic regime in Iran right now. That being said, I actually think that it is less likely they will push for that final push under Trump than had Harris won the presidential election, because this is a regime that, they don't respond to any form of appeasement. Appeasement is viewed as weakness. This is the Middle East we're talking about. And so if you have a government that isn't going to be tough on the Islamic regime, be it the Iranian nuclear program or any of the other issues, human rights issues, or the sanction enforcement, all of these things the Biden administration has utterly failed on. And so I think that at the second you see Trump come in, the mullahs are scared. The regime knows what's at stake, and they know what's at stake even from the people of Iran. They know that they're just waiting for the right opportunity to rise up and take this regime, take back the power, take back Iran from this Islamic Republic of Iran that's hijacked the country for 45 plus years. Now, militarily speaking, I do think that should they continue to push even one step further, even if it's not the final push, you are likely to see a response from the state of Israel if they deem it necessary. And I think that with a Trump administration, you're not going to see Israel act alone. I hope. Again, that remains to be seen. And again, we don't know if that's the next step. However, we do know that, after the last strikes on Israel and Iranian strikes on Israel and the Israeli strikes on Iran, the regime did state that they were going to retaliate. They've already backtracked on that. But that doesn't mean that the nuclear sites or the oil reserve sites inside of Iran are not fair targets. Remember, we're still getting, even this morning before I came to this studio, Eric, we saw alerts of drones, suicide drones being sent into Israel, of rockets. Yesterday, there were rockets being fired in central Israel. So this is an ongoing, active conflict throughout the state of Israel that is directly linked to the Islamic Republic of Iran. They fund, they train, they arm Hezbollah on that northern border. They have occupied all of those countries surrounding Israel, the Ring of Fire, they're calling it. And that is not backing up just yet. Yes, we're winning right now, but we need to actually defeat them to restore security to the state of Israel and all its citizens.
And Iran is the head of the snake. And thank God there is a new sheriff in town with Donald Trump. We shall see come January. Hey, speaking of that, Trump has said he wants to crack down on the Marxist anti-Israel madness on American college campuses. That's the subject, or a large part, of your new upcoming book. Break that down for us a bit more, why you wrote the book and why this needs to be push back against at every turn, especially the anti-Semitism?
So I actually began writing this book before October 7th because of my experience on campus way back when at USC. That was the first time I really encountered anti-Semitism under the name of anti-Zionism. And that's only exploded with social media, which actually, ironically, brings us back to Iran, the Islamic regime today. They are hugely active in subversion, in disinformation on social media, particularly surrounding this war. Some of the narratives that we've heard from, social media that have then been picked up by some of the mainstream media are things that are being artificially amplified and promoted by the Islamic Republic of Iran. And a great example of that is the Al-Ahli hospital bombing towards the beginning of the war, when Al Jazeera Arabic and several other sources, and by several I mean almost all of the mainstream media sources, said that Israel had killed 500 Palestinians. Apparently they counted 500 people in 10 minutes who were hit by an airstrike from Israel. Well, it turned out it was actually an Islamic Jihad rocket that had misfired and hit that hospital. But you will still see until today this narrative being peddled on social media in the thousands of accounts. These are not real accounts oftentimes, or if they are, they're accounts that are orchestrated and being manned by an entire unit of a cyber army that works with the IRGC. My account, of course, as an activist against the regime, has been targeted by some of these people, as have many other Iranian and Jewish and pro-Israel activists have been targeted by these disinformation efforts. And really, it's no surprise if you look at the enemies of the United States today, because the same tactics are used by Russia, by China, of course, primarily using TikTok these days, and the Islamic Republic of Iran. So social media has a big role to play in the incitement and the disinformation campaign that then students, especially younger generations, are getting very upset about without really knowing what's going on in these conflicts. And so that's a huge motivation and a reason I wanted to explain a little bit about what's going on campus, who all these players are, what they stand for, and how we can push back against disinformation on social media.
He is one of the world's most eloquent voices making the case for Israel and the Israel Defense Forces. Yosef Haddad is an IDF veteran and CEO of Together Vouch for Each Other, an organization dedicated to bridging the gap between Arab Israelis and Israeli society, and he's leading by example. He joins us now. Yosef, great to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, my pleasure, our pleasure. And you just returned from Chicago, and you ran up against some anti-Semitic, anti-Israel demonstrators. We've seen that far too often here in the U.S. over the past year. Tell us more about your experience.
I mean, it's really obvious. Those anti-Israelis, terror supporters, call themselves pro-Palestinians, but they don't really care about the Palestinians. Because if they really care about the Palestinians, they would do absolutely everything to make sure that the 101 hostages go back home to Israel in order for them to end the suffer that the terrorist organization Hamas brought on their own people. But why the American, what's so-called Palestinian, care about the Palestinian in Gaza? Why they would care about what's going on in Jabalia or in Gaza or in one of those camps that you have there? They don't. And that's why when an Arab voice like mine, as an Arab Israeli who comes to share the reality and what's going on in Israel, when I come to the United States, and in fact, when I come to almost every Western country in the world, you would see exactly the same demonstrations, the same people. Who are those people? Most of them immigrants coming from the Middle East who lived under a dictatorship, run away because they are sick and tired of living under dictatorship. Dictatorship, by the way, that they raped their women, killed their families, prevented them from freedom of speech, prevented them from freedom of religion. Just ask the Christians in those countries. And when they came to the West, instead of endorse the West and the values of the West and democracy, what they do, they actually abuse democracy and abuse the value of the West, and they want to bring the same thing that they have in the Middle East, in their own countries, back to here. And that's the biggest problem. So when I come to speak up my mind, because democracy is all about freedom of speech, if it's not aligned with their views, why would they listen to me? Why would they give me the opportunity to speak? So the only way to prevent me from speaking is intimidate me, making sure that I'm scared, scream, shout, curse. But guess what? I will not let them. I will not let them this enjoyment, because I'm not going to be scared and intimidated. I'm going to bring the truth and the reality about our country, about our society, both Arabs and Jews in Israel, and I'm going to bring the truth and only the truth about how Hamas kidnapped Jews and Arabs, killed Jews and Arabs, and how Hamas and Hezbollah, backed by the Iranian regime, They are a terrorist organization that's set to kill us all. It starts from Israel and it's going to go to the West. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, and as an Arab Israeli, you fought against these terror forces, Hezbollah in particular, Yosef. You suffered serious injuries in the Second Lebanon War, but you're out there now, a bold voice against the madness. By the way, you were protested at Columbia University, attacked there in New York, and you and I were talking off camera about the madness in Amsterdam right now.
Absolutely.
Why, in the wake of October 7th in particular, Yosef, is it so important for a voice like yours, an Arab Israeli voice, to speak out against this madness?
You know, it's crazy. You spoke about the Second Lebanon War, which I participated in. I lost 7 of my friends. I lost 3 of my commanders. I lost 1 of my soldiers. Yes, I, as an Arab, was a commander over Jewish soldiers in the IDF. For those who are calling Israel as an apartheid state, this is itself the evidence how far it is from being an apartheid state. And by the way, if you even allow me a bit more to elaborate on that, you know, we are 20% of the population, the Arab Israelis, yes? But we are 30% of the doctors in Israel, 50% of the pharmacists in Israel. Yes, of course, that's apartheid. In sports, we're doing unbelievably, amazing achievements. Yeah. The top scorer of Israel's under-19 football team is an Arab by the name Anan Khalaili. We have lawyers, we have judges, we have Arab Israelis successfully in every aspect of life. We have a judge by the name of Salim Jubran who's sent to prison, yes, an Arab judge, yeah, who's sent to prison a Jewish prime minister and a Jewish president for committing crimes. An Arab judge sent to prison a Jewish Israeli president and a Jewish Israeli prime minister. And then idiots like those pro-Palestinian terror supporters comes and tell you Israel is an apartheid state. So all this, you asked why my voice is important. Because I want to bring the reality from the perspective and from the point of view of an Arab who lives in Israel. Because who will ever tell you that once I was in Lebanon, for instance, back in 2006, and I entered south of Lebanon to fight Hezbollah, to fight the terrorist organization Hezbollah, you know, the first house that we were in the village of Benjbil, it was of a family that we entered as part of our mission, and it's a Lebanese family. Do you know what the father told me once he realized that I speak Arabic and I'm an Arab? He told me, if you think that Hezbollah is terrorizing only the Israelis, then you are getting it wrong, because they are terrorizing us as well. Please make sure to win. This is a Lebanese telling an IDF commander those words. And by the way, just to be very clear, what we are doing today, whether it's in Gaza, whether it's specifically now in Lebanon, we are not occupying Lebanon. We're not destroying Lebanon. We are freeing Lebanon. We're freeing the Lebanese as well. And we're freeing actually the Middle East from the snake, Iran. Because be sure, if Israel falls, yeah, because Iran, for them, Israel is the small devil, but America is the big devil.
That's right.
And if Israel falls, there's nothing going to be on the way to America. So basically right now, we are saving us, we are saving the Middle East, and we are saving the Western world.
So true. And I'll say it again, Israel is the first line of defense for all of Western civilization. And you are on the front lines of that first line. Yosef Haddad, great job. We'll have you get back again very soon. God bless, my friend. Stakelbeck Tonight, my all-new nightly series on current events through a bold biblical lens. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching, and God bless.